This is kind of an outrageous story. On New Year's morning in 1969, a Boston hood named Frank Balliro, the Balliro brothers, Balliro, this guy was 40 years old, but he and his two brothers, Salvatore Rocco, were petty crooks involved with the mob. They did enforcement stuff for Raymond Patriarca. It's 4:15 in the morning. He's going like a bat out of hell down a highway in East Boston, and he hit a retaining wall. He hit it so hard it took firemen a half an hour to get his corpse out of the wreck. So Balliro was part owner of the Intermission Lounge, which was known in its own right as a mob hangout. But what was better known was upstairs was Luigi's. John Martorano's father ran that place. Luigi's had been the site of several mob murders known to the cops, and probably a lot they didn't know about. This Balliro had a long police record, but so did his brothers Rocco and Salvatore. They were at the time he was killed. They were doing life sentences for murdering a Roxbury, Massachusetts woman and her little boy. In January of '63, Rocco Balliro was in jail, and he's also in love with this 21-year-old married woman named Toby Wagner. In love or in lust, who knows? The day before Balliro to go to trial, he sawed his way out of the Bristol County House of Corrections. What had happened is Toby Wagner, the girl, signed herself into the jail that morning as a visitor for Rocco under the name Toby Zimmerman. God, they never would have figured that one out, huh? And somehow slipped in these blades, hacksaw blades. So that night, Balliro, he's confined to the first floor. His cell is on the first floor. He sawed his way through two bars and he got access to the corridor. Then he walks up 3 flights of stairs to the fourth floor. He cuts his way through an iron bar up there and he gets access to what they call an isolation area. And over there he finds mattress covers. He ties them together and saws his way through more bars, ties the sheets to a water pipe going up and down through the wall, and went out the window. It was an outrageous escape. So this newly elected Sheriff Dabrowski, he conducts an investigation, and the FBI conducts an investigation. What they found out was the jail guards they didn't even rouse the prisoners once they found out that it looked like somebody had escaped. What they did is they walked up and down the corridors, they counted heads of guys sleeping in the bed, and they said, well, everybody's fine. By the way, and that was after they had found the mattress sheets tied together, dangling out the window. Obviously, what Balliro had done was to make a dummy out of pillows and stuffed blankets and shoved it in his cot. They also found out that Balliro sawing through the bars was so loud that the man living next door to the jail heard the filing and over his TV. That he went out on the street to see what was going on, and when he did, the sawing stopped. So he went back in the house, the sawing started over again. So he got out and walked over to the jail front door or whatever, and he said to the guy there, look, I think somebody's sawing their way out of the prison, maybe you should look. So the jailer got up, he made the rounds with some other guy, and they counted, as I said, guys sleeping in their bed, and that's all they did. They didn't turn the lights on for the count, anything. A while later, a teenage girl's returning home to a party. She lives next to the prison as well. And she's amazed. She sees Balliro dangling out the window, climbing down this rope, making his way to freedom. She goes over to the jail. She says, look, there's a guy escaping. So they do another cell check. This time, they found somebody had sawed their way through the bars and so forth. It's amazing. Another bed check was made. The bed check reported all are present and accounted for. But Balliro was long gone, his jail cot, of course, holding only that dummy I talked about. Rocco Balliro had a long record of escapes dating back to 1953 when he fled the Shirley Industrial School and joined the Army. When he was 18 and was given 2.5 years in the state prison for his part in beating 2 naval officers. Him and 7 other guys beat him up. In sentencing him and 3 others, the judge berated them as cowardly young punks guilty of, quote, vicious, dastardly, unprovoked assault on innocent men. In 1954, he was nabbed for a $60,000 robbery of a jewelry store after police found his fingerprints at the scene. At the time of the robbery, he was already free on bail in connection with breaking and entering and assault and battery in a separate case, two separate cases actually. Shortly after completing his sentence, Balliro was back in state prison again, this time for holding up a gas station with a toy gun. Behind bars, he won a reputation as a troublemaker. He became involved with two other prisoners, and they attacked the guards. They ran rackets inside the yards. So he and several others were removed in handcuffs and restraints to the Bridgewater jail, just because there was no other way to hold them, and supposedly Bridgewater was supposed to be more secure. In 1955, during a span of less than 2 months, he was sentenced 4 times to 30-month sentences, 3 of them to be served concurrently. In 1962, he was arrested again for robbing a store in Lynn, Massachusetts, again with a fake gun. On February 2, 1963, about a month after he escaped, he is now living between an apartment that was rented by a woman named Mary Adams, where Toby Wagner was staying, his girlfriend. So he calls up Toby Wagner, and they have an argument over the phone. It ends with Balliro telling her, "I will come over there, I will kill." She's saying, "I've had enough of this, I want to go back to my husband." Bernard Wagner, who had just been released from the Concord Reformatory that morning, and she said, "I had enough of this running on the land with you, and I don't want to do this any longer," which Balliro says, "If you do, I'll come over to your house, I'll kill you and your children and your husband." He slams the phone down, he calls Bernard Wagner's brother, John, and he says, "I'm going to kill you and your brother. You're both going to die, and I'm not fooling around." So they call Toby and say, "What the hell is going on?" Toby Wagner calls the police. She says, "This is what's happening." 3 policemen arrive, and they're hiding in the apartment, 2 in the living room, 1 in the kitchen, waiting for Balliro to show up. Wagner, Toby Wagner, the girlfriend, her boy Mark, and her daughter Bernice were in the bedroom with Mary Adams and her 3 children. Mary Adams, again, is a girlfriend of hers who actually leased the apartment. All the lights are out except for a small overhead lamp in the hallway so they could see who was at the door. At 2 a.m., it's now February 2, 1963, Rocco Balliro came to the first floor apartment. It's at 107 Center Street in Roxbury with his twin brother, Albert, and one of their guys, Albert Ciocco, Ciocco, who all had his own interesting criminal record. So the 3 of them, instead of knocking or whatever, they kick in the door to the apartment, I guess to scare the women. One of the policemen said, "Suddenly, we were surprised by the door being broken in. They kicked it in. They were armed." 2 officers walked into the hallway and confronted the 3 guys, and they said, "We're police officers." And before they got it out of their mouths, Balliro and the other guys pull out guns and started shooting. So within seconds, in this relatively small apartment, it's now a battleground. 40 shots were fired from 6 guns in a matter of seconds. 2 bullets had gone into Albert Ciocco's coat, his overcoat, and his suit jacket. For some reason, they stopped there. They didn't even touch him. It just stopped in his clothing. So the 2 police officers who had come out to greet them shot their way back into the living room and slammed the door. They fired through the door. At one point, seeing a hand holding a pistol shoved through the partially open door, the officer grabbed the weapon, but the gunman managed to pull it back from him. Adams, the woman, is in the living room. She's come out to the living room to see what's going on. She could see Wagner, Toby Wagner, and the children through a partially open sliding door to the bedroom. She said, "Toby was standing there with the baby in her arms. I was afraid for her and her children and for my children. One of the men came in this case it was more than probably Rocco, but it's never been established. He was standing only a few feet from Toby and Mark when he fired the gun. They both fell to the floor. I saw Mark," that's the little boy, "get up. He walked out into the hallway. I could see blood on his shirt." He had shot Toby Wagner directly into the forehead, as he said he would on the phone, and he shot the child, as he said he would on the phone, in the chest, as his mother was holding him. They both died. He then fled with the other 2 guys. They jumped back in the car, but they ran into a patrolman who had gotten a radio call they needed backup, and the patrolman shoots it out with them. They take off. He gives chase. Half the damn police force is chasing the guys. They were captured, and they were eventually sent to prison for killing for life, for killing Toby Wagner. Boy, in 1980, Rocco was granted a 12-hour furlough from prison. He just didn't come back. So they captured him in November of that year. The FBI found him hiding out in San Francisco. He died in 2012, and his brother Salvatore died in